In his essay Culture, Stephen Greenblatt offers a rich and useful analysis of culture and its relationship to literature that will help us unpack the text we read together this semester. The screencast I'm about to present to you here collects four of Greenblatt's key ideas, shares some key quotes from his essay, and offers a few words from me about how we might apply those ideas to our course readings. As we look at each slide, you're going to see quotes from Greenblatt's essay on the screen. I'm not going to read those quotes to you. I'm going to talk about them, assuming that you can read them on your own. If you look at this video, you'll notice that you have the option of also viewing it slide by slide, almost like a PowerPoint, and shuffling within the video. So you can use that option to revisit or review any of the quotes that you'd like to. I've also included below this video on the blog page a written text of this presentation, and you're welcome to look at that and review that. So let's take a look at some passages from Greenblatt. These first two quotes, one his own phrase about defining culture, and the second a quote from a 19th century anthropologist, are really useful for us. I think that they're quite broad, obviously, but they're particularly useful for literary studies because they allow us to focus on human beliefs and behaviors. And ultimately, what most moves us about literature is its interaction with human beliefs and behavior. But the aspect of Greenblatt's discussion of culture that I think will prove most useful to us is the interaction between forces of constraint and mobility in a culture, and how literature wades into this dynamic, give and take between forces that so powerfully shape our lives. And that takes us to the next couple of slides, which really lay out that fundamental tension in a culture between beliefs and practices that constrain us and beliefs and practices that liberate us or create spaces for mobilization. So here we have on this screen Greenblatt's definition of constraint. Again, I'm not going to read it. What I want to say about this is that what Greenblatt is up to is talking about the ways that literature explores what we cannot do in a culture, what the boundaries are. And sometimes literature imposes and perpetuates those constraints, but sometimes it undercuts them or questions them. And this is the part, of course, that will drive you crazy. Sometimes it does both at the same time. Let's take a look at a third concept from Greenblatt. This is his concept of mobility. So while culture constrains us and creates limits, in order to survive, a culture must also have vehicles and processes for mobility, for change, for generational evolution. And that's what Greenblatt is getting at here. In essence, he's saying all is not lost. We're not just constrained by culture. Cultures can and must change to survive. So resistance is not futile. We must look for both what we cannot do in a culture and what we can do in a culture. What kind of cultural mobility does a text suggest exists in a culture? That's a question we want to ask ourselves. We also want to say, does a text seem to embrace or question that mobility? And finally, does the culture? So the dynamic between constraint and mobility gets us questioning a text's relationship with that culture, the way that it embodies constraint, mobility, the tension between the two, and the spaces that can open up as they rub against each other. The last cultural key I'd like you to think about as we review some of these ideas from Stephen Greenblatt is the notion of exchange. And the definition is up there for you on the screen. What I would say is that Greenblatt really wants us to look at moments of exchange in literary texts and in any cultural texts, because in these moments we see that collision between cultural constraint and mobility at play. These kind of moments of exchange, as you can imagine, are particularly going to dominate early American literature, where we have different cultures bumping into each other along a frontier, whether it's Columbus and the Taino Indians in the Caribbean, whether it's Smith and the Powhatans in Virginia, or the Pilgrims and Puritans with the various New England tribes they encounter. We see in these moments key exchanges. And we're going to zoom in on those as we look and talk about the literature in a class. But I think you're going to find this emphasis on exchange is valuable, not just at the beginning, but actually all the way through the course, running right through the Puritans on into the great writers of the 19th century and beyond. So what I'd like you to think about doing is applying these ideas. As you read for our next class and the ones that follow, see if you can take some of these concepts from Greenblatt and play around with them. You may agree with them, you may disagree with them, but I think they give you something to talk about as you're analyzing the text, a way of unpacking figurative language and context and making your own arguments. So I hope these ideas in this quick video prove useful. Don't hesitate to ask me more about them or to talk more about them in class. See you soon.